Hey everyone, I'm Karsten.
And I'm Brianne.
And it's time for another set review. Today we'll be taking a look at Born of the Gods.
Like many middle sets, it's underwhelming as a whole, but that doesn't mean there aren't some great commander cards to be found.
First off, we'll be taking a look at the honorable mentions. These cards are cards that don't necessarily go in every deck and aren't the most relevant. And then afterwards, we'll be taking a look at the top 10 most relevant cards to Commander.
Starting off the honorable mentions, we have all of the blue-white aura cards, or at least the good ones. Eidolon of Countless Battles, Ghostblade Eidolon, Hero of Iros, Flitter Eidolon, and Afara's Enlightenment. I'm really actually a big fan of Ghostblade and Flitter Eidolon. I know they're uncommons and they're not super fancy and flashy like some of the other cards in this category, but I think they're really great for Voltron decks because they can go on your commander or they can wear equipment well if you need to get some triggers off of equipment.
Next up, we have Arbiter of the Ideal, and I know this is a really popular card with a lot of people. Crystal Ball and Top are both cards that are heavily played in this format. With the combination of Crystal Ball and Top, there's no way you're not going to get something that you want to put into play for free off this guy. It can be incredibly powerful if we have it on top, which isn't that difficult in Commander.
I'm not going to complain too much about Faded Infatuation, but I will say that I've been referring to it as not Cackling Counterpart. That aside, Cackling Counterpart's a really good card, so even without the flashback, being able to, for 3 mana at instant speed, make a copy of something that you have, we already know this is good.
After Faded Infatuation, we have 2 corner case removal spells in Whelming Wave and Bile Blight. Whelming Wave is more corner case in the type of deck that you're going to play it in, and Bile Blight is more corner case in the things that it can remove. Bile Blight is going to be great against those token decks in your play group. And Whelming Wave, if you have some sort of sea creature deck, Whelming Wave is awesome, it's flavorful, it's a one-sided evacuation. It can be very powerful in the decks that want to play it. After that, we have Fate Unraveler. This card was printed for Nekasar. This card is fantastic for Nekasar. Nekasar players, you definitely want to find room in your deck for Fate Unraveler.
And another card from the Fated cycle, Fated Return. It's really great. I know it's really expensive, but you can cast it at instant speed. Reanimating things at instant speed to block or get their abilities at instant speed is really good. So mono black decks can make the mana, and I think they'll love the card. Targeting your stuff, targeting other people's stuff, it's going to be great. And then let's not leave out that making whatever you reanimate it indestructible kind of also makes up for the mana cost.
Next up, we have 2 great sack outlets in Eater of Hope and Scourge of Skull Vale. I really like Eater of Hope. You being able to sacrifice your creatures to regenerate it is nice. Even better is the ability to remove creatures. And then Scourge of Skull Vale might be hitting the board with very small power and toughness, but in certain decks, it's not going to matter. It's going to be growing pretty quickly. I'm not a huge fan of Scourge of Skull Vale, but I definitely can see some people really taking advantage of him.
Normally, I'm not a fan of red cards, but I really like Forge Stoker Dragon because he's really awesome in beatdown decks. And I'm probably going to put him in my all-creature Rurik Thar. Because it's like, attack with this guy, you can't block, and you can't block, and you can't block, and that's what happens with Forge Stoker Dragon.
We have another red card in Fellhide Spirit Binder.
Otherwise known as not Kiki Jiki.
There's a lot of not X cards in this set. Painseer, who's not Dark Confidant. Faded Infatuation, which is not Cackling Counterpart. Now we have Fellhide Spirit Binder, who is not Kiki Jiki. However, I think there are decks that are wanting to grab this guy and really take advantage of this guy. There's kind of a cute interaction with Epiphany Storm, being able to discard a card, draw a card, tapping him down, and then, of course, being able to untap him later on, really taking advantage of his Inspired ability. And then in combination with Umbral Mantle, if you can make enough mana, you can continually tap and untap this guy for infinite tokens of whatever you want to make.
And of course we have Heroes Podium. Captain Sisay decks come to mind, but I think it's also just good in any mono blue deck, especially. Mono blue decks play a lot of legendary creatures, and then I've seen a lot of other decks that play legendary creatures, so this just helps you dig. I don't necessarily think it's for every deck, but it is really cool for the decks that can play it. Like I said, mostly Captain Sisay decks.
For low curve red decks, we have Satyr Fire Dancer and Satyr Nyxsmith. Satyr Fire Dancer turns all your red X burn spells into kill spells for your opponent's creatures as well. And then Satyr Nyxsmith, a lot of people play Rakamar. In Commander, having a little 2-1 may not seem very exciting, but with haste, he comes down, he's immediately attacking, and then immediately untapping to create a 3-1 with haste.
One of the more powerful cards in the set, because mono black decks needed this, is Sanguimancy. A 5-mana sorcery that can draw you a lot of cards is really good, because normally black has to pay a bunch of mana for stuff like that. So being able to always pay 5, because you're probably going to have pretty good devotion to black, If you have 2 or 3 other black cards out, it's still going to work. So this is going to be fantastic for mono black decks.
Raised by Wolves. The first time I saw this card, I thought it was just awesome. You can either choose to play powerful cards in Commander, or you can choose to play fun cards in Commander. I think this card, in some ways, is a little bit of both. You want to have that wolf-themed deck or something like that. This card just fits right in. There's so much flavor. And with cards like Howl of the Night Pack and Kessig Cage Breakers, Raised by Wolves is actually going to pump your dude quite a bit. Once again, it's not the most powerful card in the world. It's just so fun and so cool.
A card that most people are probably going to overlook is Gorgon's Head. But since I spend so much time building budget commander decks, I can tell you that it's very difficult to give creatures Death Touch. So if you have cards like Marath, or Deathbringer Thoktar, or Goblin Sharpshooter, you want to give them Death Touch, and your options to this point have been Basilisk Collar, which is expensive, Gorgon's Flail, so that's the affordable one, and then Quietus Spike, which is also not the cheapest card in the world. So, along with Gorgon's Flail, this is another really budget-friendly way to give cards like Deathbringer Thoktar Death Touch.
Next up, we have a card that is a big favorite of a lot of people, especially the Chaos lovers out there, Whims of the Fates. You're not playing this card to get some sort of advantage over your opponents. You're playing the card because it's fun and crazy things are happening on the table. So it's a fun card, it's a cool card, it's a flavorful card, and I think the little rules text saying piles can be empty just opened up the world for people.
Real Commander players put all of their permanents into one pile.
Exactly.
No sissies here.
Exactly. It's another card for you Chaos players out there. You guys are going to love it, and a lot of people are going to hate you playing it against them.
Next up, we have Courser of Krufix. It is really great being able to play lands from the top of your library. It's not as good as Oracle of Moldiah because not being able to play an extra land, not near as good. But in decks that can already play extra lands, such as Azusa or any deck that plays Exploration, it is going to be good.
I think the biggest problem with Courser of Krufix is that you're giving all of your opponent's information. It's public for the whole table, and you're only getting a slight benefit from it.
Getting those lands out of your way so you're not drawing them, that is good.
That is nice, but the extra information that you give your opponents, I don't know if it's worth it for the little bit of life gain that you could always just get from Grazing Gladeheart at the end of the day. Crow Manticore, man, it is such a shame that this card isn't legendary. With Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink. It gets all of the color's abilities. It's such a cool card. 5-color good stuff decks, this card just slips right in.
And if someone shows up with a Crow Manticore deck with Crow Manticore as their commander, I'm going to be like, okay, you don't let people play Crow Manticore as their commander, you're just a party killer. And our last honorable mention is Unravel the Aether. It's a functional reprint of Deglammer, that's all it is. Instant speed, take care of all those indestructible artifacts, keep people from recurring stuff from their graveyard. It's an awesome card, we already know it's awesome, so...
Play Unravel the Aether. And now for our top 10 most relevant cards in Commander. Remember, these aren't necessarily the most exciting cards or the most powerful cards, but these are the cards that we feel are the most relevant to Commander as a whole. First off, we have Silent Sentinel. There's so much value on this guy.
The real downside is he's only 4 power. Can we at least get a 5/6 for this guy, please?
Exactly, but I mean, I don't mind just attacking and getting enchantments back. You kind of have to have a deck that's committed to enchantments to really take advantage of this guy. But even if you only have a few enchantments, this guy is still getting you lots of value.
At number 9, we have Perplexing Chimera. I mean, Silent Sentinel can get him back. He's so cool. I mean, he's like Gilded Drake's janky cousin. He's the best Rattlesnake card ever because everyone's like, I don't want to play this card because then they're going to steal it. So they finally play something and you're like, okay, whatever, here. And so I think he's just going to get passed around the table like a bad fruitcake. He's a card that I think is both very fun and has the potential to actually be good.
At number 8, we have Guild. Guild is a really cool effect, and an effect that black has a couple ways to exile stuff, but not very many.
It's 4 mana, but it's kind of 3 mana, because once you have 4 mana, it reimburses you 1. It's just really good. It's really good utility.
Black, the most well-rounded color in Commander. At number 7, we have Spirit of the Labyrinth. This card, if protected, I mean, it's really fragile. It's a 3/1. I mean, it's not going to live unless you protect this card. Being able to completely negate Sphinx Revelation, Consecrated Sphinx. This card negates Nekasar. It's an enchantment, so in white has several ways to search for enchantments. And so this card's easily tutorable. This is such a solid card. The only downside is it's so fragile.
At number 6, we have the Planeswalker that makes my Simic heart very happy. Kiora the Crashing Wave. Karsten and I have been arguing about this chick, not as much as Ralzeric, but quite a bit, because I think she's fantastic. Because her +1 says prevent all damage from one permanent, and you're like, that's not good. Except for in Commander, when the one permanent you need to prevent damage from is someone's commander. And her -1, I like drawing cards and playing lands, because all Simic players love drawing cards and playing lands. I mean, her emblem's kind of silly, but I'd probably just -1 her most of the game, because that's really powerful. She's really awesome. I just wish she came out with more loyalty counters, but the fact that her ultimate's cheap kind of makes up for it.
At number 5, we have Plea for Guidance. Remember that Spirit of the Labyrinth I was telling you guys about earlier? Well, Plea for Guidance gets that.
And Perplexing Chimera, and Courser of Crufix, and Chromanticore!
And all the different enchantments that you will want. We all know that tutors are some of the most powerful cards in Commander, and this card is no different.
At number 4, we have Astral Cornucopia, and I think everyone just kind of glazed over this card, because whatever, it's boring mana rock. But for 3 mana, it taps for mana of any color. That's your standard mana rock. But, like Everflowing Chalice, it can scale up. Karsten had a good point. He's like, well, Gilded Lotus is 5 mana, and you get 3 mana out of it. Yeah, but there's only 1 Gilded Lotus. So, after you've put Gilded Lotus in your deck and you want big swingy mana rocks, this is it. I like it because I love things that scale. I love things that are what you need them to be.
So at number 3, we have Champion of Stray Souls. This guy is ridiculous. You pay 5 and you sack up a handful of creatures. Let's just say you sack your Thralls from Endrick Sar, and you get to return that many creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield. Not to your hand, not to the top of your deck or something stupid like that. To the battlefield. That is crazy good. So much value in that. And then, of course, hey, I don't like that Champion of Stray Souls. Let me get rid of him. Oh, well, let me go ahead and bring him back and go ahead and put him on the top of my library for 7. Of course, Graveyard Hate is going to make this guy very, very sad.
People don't like cutting the cool stuff in their decks for Graveyard Hate. I say this because personally I don't. At number 2, we have Fated Retribution. Instant speed wraths are so good, but the fact that it hits all creatures and all planeswalkers without hitting all artifacts or enchantments is really great. So the only mono white sweeper that can hit planeswalkers right now is Planar Cleansing, and then if you're playing black you get Merciless Eviction, but you have to choose just to hit all the planeswalkers. I just can't emphasize enough how good having something that can, at instant speed, blow the board.
Route is already powerful, and you pay 7 to cast Route at instant speed, so why not pay 7 to cast Fated Retribution and blow up all their planeswalkers at the same time? And finally, at number 1, the Archetype Cycle. And I don't like having to put cycles up at number 1, but each one is going to be so relevant.
3 of them would have been in top 10 if we hadn't put the cycle.
And those 3 are Archetype of Imagination, Archetype of Endurance, and maybe Archetype of Aggression. Archetype of Aggression is just so aggressively costed. It's a 3/2 for 3 that gives all your dudes trample, and it takes away trample from all of your opponents. And Archetype of Imagination, taking away all of your opponent's flying creatures and giving all of your creatures flying is just ridiculous.
People don't appreciate how good flying is in Commander, how great of evasion it is, because how many times do you lose to flyers? I play Moat in my 8.5 Tails deck, and when I play it, just
the game comes to a halt.
Yeah, because no one has flyers, and that just shows you how good flying is in Commander. There's a reason cards like Wonder and even Levitation are good in this format.
And then Archetype of Endurance, despite its converted mana cost of 8, that negates all of your opponent's Swiftfoot boots, any other kind of way they're going to be protecting their generals, is crazy good. And in green, it's not that hard to cast him.
And Sylvan Primordial just got banned the day that we recorded this video, so just go cut your Sylvan Primordial from your deck, and then put in Archetype of Endurance, and you're good.
And then the other 2 are also fantastic. Archetype of Courage, even though First Strike isn't that relevant in Commander, giving all of your creatures First Strike and taking First Strike away from all of your opponents really screws up combat math for your opponents and can really give you an advantage in combat. Archetype of Finality, while I'm not going to say that it's bad because giving all your creatures Death Touch and keeping your opponents from having Death Touch is great, I don't think it's as relevant in Commander as the other 4. And also, all the archetypes are uncommons. These guys are going to be easy to find, they're going to be everywhere.
Their rarity is what finally made us decide to put them at number 1, because someone will probably just be like, here, I open this archetype, you can have it.
I mean, if you're a Commander player that plays only Commander, you only have to open a couple of packs packs in order to get 1 or 2 of these guys. These guys are great, they're fantastic, and they are most definitely the most relevant cards coming out of Born of the Gods. Well, this was our take on the commander cards that can go into your main 99. We'll have a video talking about all of the potential generals from Born of the Gods coming soon. Until then, I'm Karsten.
And I'm Brianne.
And thanks for watching.